Hello, welcome to Department Talk Bollocks, or Department TB. Widely inaccurate, probably offensive, definitely amateur.
And that's with bollocks with a huge B. Bollocks.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Andrew.
And I'm Scott.
And this is part 2 of our discussion about Doctor Who.
Which is a long discussion.
Yeah, so I asked Andrew to come up with his 5 favourite stories.
Yes.
And I thought, and I checked this, and I thought first of all, in Doctor Who magazine, they did a poll called the Mighty 200. I think it was up to Planet of Third Planet. I think it was up to the Easter special with David, the year of the specials.
Yeah, it was the 200th.
It was 200
magazine,
200 story. And basically in the poll, this was what came in the top 5. This is voted for by fans, readers of Doctor Who magazine. At number 5, it was The Empty Child and the Doctor Dances. Which is the gas mask episode.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Number 4 is The Talons of Wang Chiang, which we won't really go into much detail about now because I have a feeling it might be coming up soon. Genesis of the Daleks at number 3,
another one,
which introduced the character of Davros.
Yes.
At number 2, it was Blink, which was a David Tennant story, although David Tennant didn't really feature in it all that much, which was written by Stephen Moffat, which has introduced us to the Weeping Angels.
Oh, yes.
And at number 1 is The Caves of Androzani, which was the first story directed by Graham Harper, who would later go on to direct another story for Colin Baker. He is the only director to actually return to the new series of Doctor Who.
Yeah, that's because the rest of them are dead.
Yeah, well, yeah. Although Facts fans, I will point out that Michael Kerrigan, who directed Battlefield, also directed 2 episodes of the Sarah Jane Adventures.
Yes.
And interestingly enough, I think it was just pure coincidence, but he directed Enemy the Bane, which had Nicholas Courtney as the Brigadier. So he actually directed 2 Brigadier stories.
Yes.
So.
Oh, yeah.
Your 5.
Well, I have a top 5, but it's not in any particular order, but I do have a number 1. There was quite a few that was close to the top 5, but I think we'll talk about them later. I think the first one that I want to mention is the Dalek Invasion of Earth. This was a William Hartnell story, obviously a little bit before my time. But I did actually get a chance to watch this when it first came out on VHS.
So Dalek Invasion of Earth, that's the one that's in 2150 AD with Bernard Cribbins, right? And
that was the Peter Cushing version. Yes, the original one, the original one, the one that was black and white, not the full colour with multicoloured Daleks in. The original black and white Dalek Invasion of Earth. The reason that I've chosen this one is because it was the first time to me that Doctor Who felt epic. It was such a huge story, and it was the very first time that Doctor Who actually started filming on location as well.
Yeah.
I did look this up in case anyone wants to question me on that. It was the very first time that they used location. They filmed it in and around London.
And the only time they could, because they wanted these sort of big iconic images of Dalek coming across Tower Bridge, and the only time that London was quiet was on a Sunday, so they actually filmed all the Dalek stuff on a Sunday when nobody was around, and they put this sort of Dalek graffiti or the Dalek language on various landmark.
They did it on a couple of monoliths.
And I think the police came and said you can't do that. That's graffiti, and they had to scrub really hard because they thought it was going to be easy to take off, and it wasn't, and they used the wrong kind of paint or something like that.
But at the end of the day, it was the scope of the episode. That's what interests me. I mean, even down to the set designs that they used in the studios, the look of London, ruined London, even down to the characters that we used.
And what I love is probably the introduction of it, and it's something that Stephen Moffat has promised in the new series. It's the introduction of what I would call the slotty title. It's the Dalek Invasion of Earth. It's does what it says on the tin. It's not just like the Daleks or Edge of Destruction, Marco Polo. It's a big title, and it promises something pretty epic. The Dalek Invasion of Earth. That's where you live.
I mean, as far as I can remember, looking back on listings and the way that the Daleks were used, I think Dalek Invasion of Earth was the second of the Dalek ones, and the first one being set on Skaro was obviously contained within the Skaro, and it didn't really have that sort of, apart from the main characters of the Doctor, Susan, it didn't have that impact that Dalek Invasion of Earth had, because it was showing
and they
Earth in the
they
future,
became more powerful. It's been a while since I watched it, but I believe that they couldn't leave the city.
Yeah, in the very first Dalek episode, they couldn't leave the city. It was something to do with
they could only travel
of the metal floor.
So, and then all of a sudden, here's a Dalek, on Tower Bridge, and all of a sudden...
It was pretty much on home turf.
Yeah, it was on home turf.
Back in the 60s, it was well into the future. Looking back on it now, it wasn't that far in the future. And you can imagine it now actually still happening.
Yeah. A pie tin flying crest.
Yes,
It's like, what's on the DVD? What's really great is they've actually got CGI, and I mean sometimes it's questionable. I'm quite fond of the CGI effects, which have been an optional extra on some of the Doctor Who's. Some fans aren't fond of them, but I don't think anyone can dispute. They replaced the model shot. Well, I say model, but it was essentially a pie tin flying, and they replaced it with CGI in black and white with a CGI shot of this much more epic Dalek spaceship, which was kind of similar to what was in the TV21 comics at the time.
I mean, to be honest with you, that didn't really take away from the episode because the scope and scale of the episodes, as it was, were big enough to take away from whatever special effects that they did. Because at the end of the day, there wasn't that much special effects in it, because it was primarily set-based, where you had the ruined city around you, and the interaction between the survivors and the main characters, and even when they got to the end, where it was the mining place, because I think it was something to do with trying to mine through and create some sort of volcano.
In Bedford.
I mean, it was just the scope of the whole episode that really gripped me. Even though I watched it I think it was the 80s, I think I watched Dalek Invasion of Earth, but it actually hit me as being that Doctor Who's past still had this huge scope that they could contain within 6 episodes, and still produce an amazing drama. And it still to this day has one of my favourite lines in, and it was when Susan left and the Doctor said, "One day we shall be back. Yes, Susan, we shall be back." Yeah. And it was used in the 5th Doctors as the opening part, and it still sends a shiver up my spine watching William Hartnell say that line.
I can remember that because that was something my dad had got the 5 Doctors on. He didn't have a VHS recorder, but my Uncle Steve did, and he knew that the 5 Doctors was going to be something special. Yeah. So and knowing that at some point he was going to have a VHS player, he got my Uncle Steve to record the 5 Doctors of television. So whenever I watch it, just as an aside, whenever I watch it now, there's a moment when they're in the Capitol, and to me, it's not as broadcast on the DVD, on the special edition DVD, because it doesn't have the phone line. West Midlands viewers call something or other to donate to children in need, because they showed it on Children in Need night, and it's not there. But that speech, I remember, I can. One day I shall come back. Yes, one day, and there will be no regrets, no tears, no anxieties. Just go forward and all your beliefs.
It still sends a shiver up your spine when you watch it, because I think it sends more of a shiver up your spine knowing that William Hartnell has passed away. And I think when you watch the 5 Doctors, because Richard Purnell plays him, and watching that original black and white footage of William Hartnell saying this, and actually appearing in the 5 Doctors as him, actually does send those shivers up the back of your spine.
I would agree with that. I think it's sort of, and it also, I think, pretty much sets up the what becomes part of the format of Doctor Who, when it scatters the companions.
Because from then on, new companions come in. Because up until that point, it was the same companions.
No, it had been done before. I meant in terms in the story. It'd been done before, but it really kind of sets up, like the Doctor and his companions leave. They say, "Oh, something's odd's going on here. Let's split up," and then it takes them the remainder of the story to actually reunite.
There are other stories earlier than that do that. Obviously I misunderstood what you were saying, but what it does is, this is the first episode where an original cast member leaves. Yeah. And it sets Doctor Who up as showing that new companions come in, because the next episode, it's the start of that introduction of new companions coming in. And I think it's also that point in Doctor Who that shows that it can continue and change and introduce new new characters and new companions. You know, it's
and
quite
it kind
important.
of it sets up the idea that Doctor Who was actually that the Doctor is the main character.
Yes,
because there's a great blog at the moment called Adventures with a Wife in Space, where it's a guy who's making his wife watch Doctor Who from the beginning, including reconstructions. And one of her famous lines, like early on, was like, "They might as well have called the series Ian," because it's like because a lot of the action beats and a lot of the exciting heroic moments are given to Ian. And I think with the Dalek Invasion Earth, it's like there is one of the ensemble is leaving, and it's like, actually, you know, if we can do it with Susan, then we can probably do it with Ian and Barbara. To be honest, we don't want to lose them, but if they're going to go, we can probably cope without them. And it sort of sets up that idea, even if it's, you know, subconscious at that point, I think, and it sets it, you know, and the audience starts to realise that, oh yes, this can change. It's not Doctor Who is not a programme that's just about this group of people in the TARDIS. It changes, and the TARDIS and the Doctor is pretty much all you need. So
anyway, moving on. My next one is actually a Patrick Troughton one. Again,
this is episode 2 now.
We're on to my second one. Anyway. We're on to a Patrick Troughton.
This is going to be a two-part.
Yeah. Well, what it is, what we'll do is we'll cut it at the end of the when we start doing our top 5, and then we'll start it on that one. But anyway, my second one is actually a Patrick Troughton story. I never got a chance to see much of Patrick Troughton when I was younger. It was also quite a dark era of Doctor Who. The fact that not a lot of Patrick Troughton episodes had survived, and they weren't repeating much on TV at the time. So Patrick Troughton only ever really came into my subconscious during the 5 Doctors, and when the VHS started coming out. And it was one of those eras that I wanted to look at, because I'd heard a lot of rumours, especially from my mum, that Patrick Troughton was this fantastic actor who, he was a good character actor, and he played the Doctor in a very different way to William Hartnell. And looking back on the episodes now, I understand why Patrick Troughton is now classed as one of the quintessential Doctor Who's. And he could possibly be the one Doctor who saved the series. He had a character that was so different to Bill Hartnell.
Yeah.
That was so different to anyone that followed him. But if it hadn't been for Patrick Troughton, Doctor Who might not have survived.
And that's something that, you know, can't be understated. Is what a kind of bold idea that was, because and the fact that Patrick Troughton had a huge say in the way his character was going to be portrayed, which was then looking at the actor rather than the series on how the Doctor was going to go forward. It was, I mean, because you could easily have played it like, you know, got Jeffrey Belden or somebody like that to have played it like William Hartnell.
Yeah.
And I don't think that there would have necessarily been anything wrong with that, but it certainly wouldn't have ensured the longevity of the series.
It wouldn't have done, because the fact that Patrick Troughton played such a different character.
Yeah, I mean,
he took the Doctor forward in so many ways that the people of today watching Doctor Who would never even dream of. Because, I mean, Matt Smith has always said that Patrick Troughton is the one character that he looks back on.
Yeah.
And he takes a lot of inspiration from Patrick Troughton.
Yeah.
And I think that might be one of the reasons why I like Matt Smith's portrayal of the Doctor over any of the others that I've seen, because of his the quality and the look.
There's a lot of ideas in there, like there's something which is quite common with the Doctor now. He uses as a shorthand, I guess, because of the shorter time slot, the psychic paper. But the idea of the Doctor being able to ingratiate himself with a group of people and being very, very quickly becoming like, "Hello, I'm Dr. John Smith, and I'm an expert," and people start listening to him. I mean, there'll be one dissenter who'll be like, "He's talking nonsense," but for the most part, and like, I mean, it kind of died down very quickly in the Troughton era. Originally, it got him down as like a master of disguise. And he actually wore disguises and outfits.
Yes. That then John Pertwee did as well. I mean, John Pertwee did that as well.
Lest we not forget the cleaning lady.
In Green, but Patrick Troughton did also introduce a lot of things that would then become future Doctor Who. So he introduced the sonic screwdriver.
Yeah.
He introduced a lot of some of the creatures that will go on today as being creatures that we know, so like the Cybermen and the Makara from Gridlock. I mean, obviously, hopefully, we'll get to see them again at some point in the future. But also the Time Lords, the way that the Time Lords are, that was introduced in a Patrick Troughton story, even though it was later on. And Unit was introduced in Patrick Troughton era, so Patrick Troughton was really important to Doctor Who. Now, the episode that I'm choosing that's in my top 5, it's actually no surprise. It's under everyone's thoughts. It's Tomb of the Cybermen. I think the reason that I'm choosing this over other ones that I enjoy of the series, like The Invasion and The War Games, which are two of my favourite of the era, is because it's the first that I watched of Patrick Troughton. It's the very first time that I got to see him playing the Doctor. And the reason I like Tomb of the Cybermen is the claustrophobia.
Yeah.
I like that idea that these adventurers, this group of characters that even now are fully formed characters. Each individual characters are fully formed with different thoughts and different ideas, have adventured into this tomb, not quite knowing what they're getting into. One cast member dies quite early when he gets electrocuted on the doors, and finding this horror within. And then one of the characters that you kind of think is quite good at the start has suddenly turned into this character that wants to see these Cybermen come out of the tomb and thinks that he can control them, but he can't control them. This guy cannot control the Cybermen because they have the thoughts of their own, but he thinks that he can rule them.
Yeah.
And it's just the overall episode in itself is. A lot of people look back on it today and they like it, but at the same time they think it's quite cheesy. But at the end of the day, it's a really good example of 60s quality television.
First of all, the idea about controlling the Cybermen, that becomes like quite a common trope in Doctor Who. This idea that that a human or one man can control this evil race. I was working with them, but it was for the human race's good. I was doing it for the, that idea that they can somehow manipulate an entire alien race to their own ends. That becomes a common trope. And then there are brilliant the imagery of like the tomb. It's a model shot. I'm not quite sure how it was achieved, but whereby the snow melts and then they come out and then the snow reappears.
It was done in reverse to show the snow coming back.
That's really, really effective stuff.
It is, and I think
watching it on a small black and white television, and that would look
which I might hold my hands up until about 77. I think all I ever watched was black and white TV, but it was
but
it's very effective how they did it, I think that the biggest thing about Tomb of the Cybermen that a lot of people a lot of people who enjoy Doctor Who don't really see today is that sort of claustrophobia feel.
Yeah.
The fact that these characters are stuck in this place, they can't get out because the craft has been damaged purposely.
Yeah.
They've got nowhere to turn to. The Doctor can't get out of there. The companions can't get out of there. It's just this amazing interaction between all of the characters with this danger of the Cybermen that we know can kill any single one of those characters in a single moment. And that really made me feel a lot about the story. There was a lot of dramatisation in that story that you really don't see today. You don't see a lot of that anymore.
And also something that has just occurred to me at the beginning of that story. There's a scene between Victoria and the Doctor, because Victoria has just joined the Doctor in the previous story.
Who, by the way, is one of my early crushes.
And fair enough. That's
that lovely blonde hair tied back with the riding boots and
but with Victoria in the previous story, Evil the Daleks, her family had been killed. And the Doctor, and she's kind of unsure, and the Doctor says to her, nobody else can do what we do.
Yeah,
there's
that touching scene between them actually about him and his past. As well, because he talks about something along the lines of
they're always
there's these people that are always there in my mind.
When I close my eyes,
I think of them. and I think that's really beautiful.
But it's also sort of the beginning of the idea of it's fun. And it's a choice. Like, it's not like Ian and Barbara who are just sort of whisked away. I mean, of course they have a laugh while they're there, but they're whisked away, and they're always trying to get home. They're whisked away by the Doctor, and it takes them ages to get home. With Victoria and Jamie, you're starting to get. I mean, perhaps I don't really know that much about Ben and Polly, to be honest, but you're starting to get the idea of.
Yeah. I think Ben and Polly were a very in between characters.
Yeah,
they were rounded to a certain point, but they were that crossover character between the William Hartnell era and the Patrick Troughton era, and it was a shame, but they were very quickly dispatched.
Yeah,
it was like. This is us trying to come into the 60s by having the youth of the 60s, but they very quickly got rid of them in favour of Jamie when Jamie was introducing the Highlanders, and they wanted a companion specifically for, and they introduced Victoria, and then later, you know,
and it's starting to become its companions who are having fun.
Yes.
Who want to be there and are just there for the adventure and haven't particularly got anywhere else they want to be.
Yeah.
They want to be there with the Doctor because they're having a laugh, and I think because also the actors were having such a great time, and I think if their agents weren't saying, you really should be moving on now, I think they could have carried on for years. But you get the impression as well that the second Doctor and Jamie could have carried on.
Well, they did do. Yeah, they did do up until the point that they were turned around and said, look, we're going to have to, start looking at this, and it was I'm actually slightly dismayed over when they did the complete changeover to John Pertwee that they didn't kind of have that crossover of the characters. So they didn't introduce Jamie as being the character that could go and follow John Pertwee on. So there wasn't that kind of that you get today where a single companion crosses over. You don't see that. It's just complete stop. Once Patrick Troughton era ended,
we did get that with Matt Smith.
A little bit. But it was a reboot purely. But definitely. the Jamie character and the Patrick Troughton character were purely made for each other, and it was a perfect example of a fantastic twinning of characters.
Yeah.
And obviously the female characters that were in between were quite sexy, and I can't remember the name of the character, but I'll mention it very, very quickly. There was a character that was introduced with the black hair bobbed. Do you remember the name? She was introduced in the Troughton era. Zoe. And some of them costumes were quite risque. Yeah. Oh yes, I remember a black and white picture of her in one of the first episodes showing a bit of camel toe.
And
I was thinking in the 60s. Oh yeah.
I think it's the Mind Robber where the TARDIS is. It's all turns out to be a dream, but the TARDIS is blown up. And Jamie and Zoe are left
when she's in the
console and it's flying, and she's wearing this like sparkly silver catsuit and spinning round in space.
That was possibly the most sexiest moment in Doctor Who ever.
Possibly, yes.
Apart from seeing Sarah Jane's knickers in Ark in Space. But
I've not noticed that.
Well, I will. Well, actually, I can mention it. It was when she was put on the bed, in Ark in Space, and you got to see right up her skirt. But anyway, against this, we'll move on from Patrick Troughton, because even though I like Patrick Troughton and the way that he did his character, that sort of clown character that detracted from his amazing intellects and being able to get on, I will now go on to my next. And that's Inferno, which is a John Pertwee story. It's a little bit of a shocker, this one, because I was a little bit stuck on my top 5 because the vast majority of mine are obviously Tom Baker, and I'm looking back on stories and trying to think which ones can I introduce some other Doctors. Unfortunately, my top 5 don't include anything after Tom Baker, but there are a few John Pertwee ones that I did enjoy quite a bit, and one of them was Inferno. And the reason that Inferno struck me was because of the rawness of the way that they filmed it. During the first series of John Pertwee, it was done mostly on film. Yeah. And it actually comes across as being more genuine, more realistic, more original. And the fact that Inferno comes across quite well is because the characters that you kind of got to know throughout that first series of John Pertwee, you started seeing in the parallel universe. It was the first time it was introduced in Doctor Who as being these realistic evil characters that suddenly John Pertwee's doctor was dropped into, and he had to try to say, look, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. And the characters they always trusted that were around him turned around and said things like, we're not going to do this because we don't know you, we don't know who you are.
It's quite a clever concept in terms of it draws on your established cast. It gives them a little bit. It gives them a little bit more to do.
And the fact that they did it quite well as well. The fact that you saw the Brigadier in a completely opposite role. I mean, it just showed how good actors they were at the time.
Yeah.
They really did take on those roles without being too.
I would say that I think it's too long.
It is 7 episodes. It could have been 5.
Yeah.
And got away with it. It did drag on that little bit.
Yeah.
But in the long run, it was a perfect example of the way Doctor Who could go forward and show something that you've never seen before, because you don't see that alternative side to Doctor Who many times. You saw Patrick Troughton with the unit area, you saw the early John Pertwee with the unit area, you got to see the units starting to work together, and then suddenly he's dropped into an alternative reality.
It's kind of. I mean, obviously there've been the story Edge of Destruction, which have been set entirely on the TARDIS, but it's something that you see a lot more in the new series, and it actually pulls on the regulars. It calls on them to do something, and I mean there is a supporting cast, a guest cast, but it's mainly your regulars doing the work, which I think was something pretty, something different for the time, and Nicholas Courtney with an eye patch is just brilliant.
Much better than the eye patch that was later portrayed in the Android Invasion of Earth. How that guy didn't know that he did not have an eye. You got an eye patch because we took your eye out. Yeah, really? I mean, really? Yeah. Would you imagine someone having an eye patch over their eye and thinking, my eye's not there? Yeah. But anyway, so that's my third one, which is Inferno. My fourth one I'm going to move on to, because this is now moving into the territory that was the first time I saw Tom Baker, strange enough. And it was the first time I saw Tom Baker because he started introducing the repeat episodes of Tom Baker in the 70s to introduce Tom Baker to the audience who hadn't seen him before. And the one I'm choosing, it was a bit of a toss-up between this and Ark in Space, but I went for this one, and it's Genesis of the Daleks.
Yes.
Now, Genesis of the Daleks has always been a favourite of mine. It's the first time that 6 episodes have felt like the story fits into 6 episodes. There's no padding, there's no overacting, there's no crap in there. It's just purely a fantastic story. And it's the first time that I saw Tom being the Doctor that I imagined him to be. So he had the questions that he always questioned himself over various things. I do have a few notes in front of me because I had to do it before I came here, and I can't read them because it's too dark in here. But I love that little dilemma that he has about blowing up of the mutants.
Do I have that right?
Yeah. I mean, even that little bit where he says, if someone pointed out a child and said it will grow up to be evil, could you then kill that child? And that little dilemma that he had, and eventually he's questioned himself and said, I'm not going to do it. I am not going to do this because... And obviously it happened as an accident afterwards because he put the electric cables on the floor, Dalek went over it and blew him up anyway, but he didn't do it personally. And that to me was the quintessential Tom Baker as being the Doctor, which was lost a lot in a lot of his later scenes when he started being more comedic. But what I enjoyed more about Genesis of the Daleks was it was possibly one of Terry Nation's best work. Even though he'd written the Daleks up until this point, he finally come up with an original story.
Yeah, there's something about it. I was going to say that because in the Pertwee era, he did Planet of the Daleks, which Planet of the Daleks is actually essentially the Daleks again.
It is. It's a nice version of it. I do enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, I think it's a punchy.
I think he copied it on every single one. I think the only one that he didn't copy on was the Dalek Invasion of Earth.
But this idea, I don't know where he got the idea of Davros, but it just seemingly gave him this kind of impetus, and it was like, it suddenly, it's a brilliant idea, and you can't believe they never thought of it before. It's like, well, why don't you go back to, you're in it's a time machine,
Yeah.
why don't you go back and do a story about the creation of the Daleks?
Yeah.
And it's,
I mean, the fantastic thing about it, I mean, I don't know how people feel today about, obviously people look back on Nazis today as being evil, blah, 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 but back in the 70s it was still quite fresh because a lot of people that were around me, whether it was grandparents, neighbours, they either fought during the war or were part of the war. The older people of the time talked about the war, and Genesis of the Daleks introduced the Khaled race, which was essentially a Nazi race, and the characters came from that sort of evil Nazi scientific background, where you had Naida, who was obviously a member of the Gestapo. You had the general character who was actually in the low years later. And he played a very obvious Nazi command officer, even down to Davros, that sort of evil, twisted Nazi scientist.
Yeah.
And all of it together, if you watch it now, you actually look at those Nazi characters that you imagine back from the Second World War. And it was such an interesting idea that you actually put the Khaleds in that position, that they were that Nazi-like people, and obviously the other side, the Thals were more like the English defending their little island or their little bunker or whatever it was, surrounded by sea.
Yeah. And they're not great at it either.
They're not great at it. They're just holding on. And it was just this concept that I now understand. Back then I didn't as a child, but now I understand why sometimes Mary Whitehouse had obvious little niddles at why Doctor Who was, because it was quite close to the bone. It was very adult. That original opening scene that was set in the battlefield with the fog and the guy in the gas masks coming through, it was actually quite hard hitting for its day. Back when I was younger, I saw it as entertainment, and this was like good winning over evil, because the Doctor won, he did this and this, and he defeated the Nazis. But now I look at it more from the view that, the BBC really did look very forward in this. Now, whether it was because of the Hinchliffe-Holmes era, I'm not really sure, because they really did look at what was going on at the time and what people thought at the time, and they really pulled from those sort of war images, gothic images, things that were going on at the time, to introduce into the 3 seasons that they did. And Genesis of the Daleks was a quintessential Doctor Who episode of the time, with such a huge scope. I mean, it split all of the characters up. So you had Sarah Jane that was taken to the nuclear bomb site, and she was dealing with nuclear waste and getting ill off nuclear waste. And you had Harry and the Doctor trying to find her again. They were taken by this Nazi Khaled group, and I think the only thing that let it down was the giant clam. Harry obviously stepping on the giant clam. Yeah. But other than that,
I think that's going to be a recurring theme, because I think it's certainly my number one. There's a certain performance which perhaps lets it down.
Yeah, so I've got one in my next one, but we'll.
There's no. I don't think there's any such thing as a perfect Doctor Who, but it's Genesis of the Daleks is definitely up there.
It is, and the sets were amazing. Yeah. For the series of its time, Yeah. Even the scope of the nuclear device that they used, you actually felt the scale of that, which sometimes you don't see. Yeah,
and it really changed the colour scheme of the Daleks. It suddenly became very kind of grey, and very kind of uninviting. And you watch that against one of the Peter Cushing Dalek films, and it's like it's night and day.
It is. The Peter Cushing films really took the Daleks to I think the reason Peter Cushing... Actually, no. I know why the Peter Cushing films had the Daleks in colour and various different colours. Because it was the first time it was in colour. Yeah. And what it was is the filmmakers said, now we're doing it in colour, let's have every different colour Dalek under the sun. And that's why they did it. And that's the reason. And, Tom Baker's era, when they did Genesis of the Daleks, they kind of brought it back and said, look, the Daleks are this simple, evil fighting machine. Yeah. And I actually know why they're grey, because it was the Nazi colour.
Yeah.
And that's why they were grey. It was pure and simple. And the whole episode can be just literally said that Daleks, the Khaleds, they're Nazis. They're evil. They want to take over the world. They want to take over this. They want to, get rid of the Thals because they're, say, the Jews as an example. They just want to take over the whole of the planet, then take over the whole of the universe, whatever. It was pretty much a Nazi concept. That's what I love about Genesis of the Daleks, and the fact that the Doctor is put into this situation by the Time Lords and has to try and to figure it out and get out of that situation. And it was a beautiful episode, it really was. All 6 of them. It was probably the height of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
But there is one that will overtake that, and that's in my eyes. My next of the 5, and it's actually my all-time favourite, is Talons of Weng-Chiang. It constantly features in the top 10. I don't care what other people think. I really don't. If other people want to put it in the top 10, then they're more than welcome to. The reason I like Talons of Weng-Chiang, there's a lot of reasons. I've always been interested in the Victorian era.
Yeah.
And I know that the BBC have always done period drama perfectly.
Yeah.
And that's what they did with Talons of Weng-Chiang. They set it in the Victorian era, and it was proper Victorian ideas, themes. The police in the Victorian era are portrayed exactly how they are. Even the racism, which it's got a lot of criticism in the past over the racism that's introduced in Talons of Weng-Chiang, but that's how it was back in the Victorian era. And even though people look at it today and think that's racist, back in the Victorian times it wasn't.
Yeah, and if you don't want children to kind of idealise points in history like that, you want them to see the truth and the reality of it. It's not overdone by any stretch.
It's not in any way. I mean,
imagination. It's there, and it's something, and good. It does raise a question.
It does raise the questions, but and the good thing is it raises the questions in the right way.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that the flavour and the background of the Victorian era, like the music hall theatre, the London fog, even the Chinese tongues, they're all brought out in such amazing detail. Yeah. Obviously, apart from the infamous giant rats, but that's probably the only letdown of the whole episode. But the fact that this was quintessentially Robert Holmes and Philip Hinchcliffe's last adventure together.
Yeah.
Not Tom Baker's last adventure, it was their last adventure, because this was when they were going out on a high.
Yeah.
And, before it, they had the fantastic episode of Robots of Death and Face of Evil. They had such a fantastic series behind them. They wanted to go out on a high, and they did with the Talons of Weng-Chiang.
Yeah.
They introduced everything that they wanted to do. And it was a nightmare for Mary Whitehouse, which I don't really care about. It included people attacking each other with knives and nunchucks, and it was just this amazing, fantastic, atmospheric story that had just amazing characters.
What do you think about the original idea about the villain behind it all being the Master? I mean, do you think that would have added to it, or do you think it's better the way it is?
I think it's better the way it is.
Right.
I don't ever think it should be the Master, because the Master was introduced halfway through the series that it was in as being this decrepit, last chance character.
Yeah.
It was never meant to be the Master anyway. It was always going to be this character Magnus Greel, because the original writer Robert Banks Stewart had written The Fall from the Future, which was the story was based on, as being this evil, genetically enhanced character. Yeah. In the same way that Khan was in Star Trek, from the future, who had nowhere else to go in the future because he'd done what he needed to do, but was starting to be fought back, and he had to go back in the past because that was the only way that he could survive. Unfortunately, the technology wasn't there to sustain his life, and no, I never think that the Master should have been that character, because Magnus Greel was such an amazing character, and I can't remember the name of the guy who played him, actually. You might know.
No.
No, is he gone from your mind? It was played with such conviction, and it was never as over the top as a lot of people think it is. You know, some people look at it and think it's quite hammy. I don't. I actually really think that
just brought Magnus Greel back in Big Finish. They've done a Peter Davison story called The Butcher of Brisbane, I believe.
There's also a novel which was featured the Fourth Doctor and the First Romana, God bless Mary Tam, rest in peace, which was, I think it was called The Shadows of Wen Chang, which was set in the 20s, which was kind of a follow-on. And also had the character of Mr. Sin in it as well, which was brought forward from this one. But the other part that I really liked about Talents of Wen Chang is Jago and Lightfoot character. I mean, there were such strong characters, so strong that they've eventually been brought back into their own series of the Jago and Lightfoot series, which I thought could have been done years ago. And there was talk of it. They actually talked about Jago and Lightfoot being a TV series, but it never took off. I think it was just talk.
I mean, I think they're like the quintessential Holmesian double act.
Yeah.
Because Robert Holmes, writer, one of his tropes. Prolific Doctor Who writer. One of his tropes was he wrote very good double acts.
Yes, he
very
did.
strong.
And Jago and Lightfoot being highlights.
And then there are other little ones that you kind of forget about, like Unstoff and
from Ribos Operation.
Glitz and Dibber from Mysterious Planet. It's a recurring theme of his work. And actually, if you watch it, sometimes you don't realise it, but there are other double acts going on there that you didn't notice. It was like just in the periphery. He's very good at sort of having two characters that kind of bantering with each other. And in his the Black 7 episode he did called Gambit, again there's another Holmesian double act. John Leeson plays a character, and he's incredibly a servant to some odd, very kind of over the top camp gentleman. I forget the details of it, so that was a pretty pointless anecdote.
Yeah, right. I mean, there's other points in the episode that I like. I mean, I like the fact that they've followed the history continuities of Doctor Who in this episode. Like I keep saying Tom Baker, but it's the Doctor basically. When he says, "I haven't been in China for 400 years," obviously harking back to Marco Polo. You know, it's just little things like that. And I mean, it also introduces some fantastic quotes that I love. The one that I always find is amazing is the little quote that he says is "Sleep is for tortoises." You know, when Lightfoot comes down and say, "Haven't you slept?" and "No, sleep is for tortoises." I just think it's just a fantastic little statement. And I do like there's a one-eyed yellow idol to the north of Kathmandu, and then he misquotes it as being Harry Champion, and when it's not, it's actually Milton Hayes' poem. You know, it's just little things like that I think make the episode so imaginative and interesting. And I mean, it's been a huge inspiration to what I've wrote, because I really do like that Victorian era. The fact that they also introduce little ideas like the Jack the Ripper side to it. You know, when he says, is it Jolly Jack at work again? When all these these girls are going missing. Obviously, there's a lot of continuity issues in that. Why is Magnus Greel just taking girls and not boys? And but it just doesn't detract from the whole cinematic quality of Talons of Wen Chiang. It's just very interesting, bold. It's a story that I think every Doctor Who fan, whether they've seen it or not, should put it on DVD and watch. Because it's an example of Doctor Who at its best.
And
purely.
I can't remember who directed that one.
David Maloney.
It was a David Maloney,
David
right?
Maloney, it was, yeah.
So
David Maloney, one of the
good...
he did The Evasion, didn't he? He was the one who... He was quite a young director, but he died of a heart attack recently.
No, that was Douglas Camfield.
I apologise.
It
was Maloney,
David Maloney, and the production designer on it was Roger Murray Leach, who did The Ark in Space, and I mean, it was all the best, best writer. One of the best.
It was Doctor Who at his best, with whether it was down to design, and all the writing was done literally within a couple of weeks. Because Robert Banks Stewart story didn't quite work. Robert Holmes and Philip Hinchcliffe together sat down and wrote a 6-part episode within a week. and they produce this absolutely fantastic story with such character, such a language of the era. Just a fantastic example of Doctor Who, and that's why it's my number one.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that brings us to the end of part 2. If you're still with us and still want to learn any more about our opinions on Doctor Who, then you should join us next for part 3 of Department Talk Bollocks' discussion about Doctor Who. Live long
and talk bollocks.